Karen Burniston here with an assembly video for two of our die sets. These are dies number 1157, the tiny house pop-up, and then 1158, the mushroom tiny house add-ons. And you can check out all of our die designs at KarenBurniston.com. Okay, to make a tiny house, we need some tiny pieces. There are 13 dies in this set. It also features a stamping die, so this is a very cool new technology. A time saver would be to add score tape to the back of the little cardstock colors that you're using before die cutting all of those little accessory pieces. Not for the house itself, but just for all of the little things like window boxes and frames and flowers, and then they become stickers. Just like with some of our other house dies, the door cuts both the door frame and the door, and there is a stencil feature for the doorknob as well as for some little paneling on the door. There is a standalone rectangle in the set. It's two ways to use it. On this house, I'll show you the first, which is it is actually the same width as the door. So if you just put it behind the door, say if you've cut it out of yellow, it will turn the lights on in the house. Something you might also try, optional, is then once you've got your piece in, go in and trace around those openings with the same black pen you used for the paneling. Okay, let's talk about the house. It actually cuts two pieces. It cuts the house itself as well as the part that supports the roof. And it's been scored to make the house. I always like to fold towards myself and then sort of immediately reverse it. Every one of those folds is going to be a mountain fold, which means you're folding away from yourself, looking at the top of the mountain. And then you just bring the tapered tab around to the other side and glue it in place. And of course, you can find a flat position to do that in. You don't have to kind of do that in the air. I would suggest a nice strong glue. I like my LINECO neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle. We do sell both of those items on our website. So just making sure that it's straight, attach it to that tab. And then once it's attached, you can collapse it the other way as well so that it learns both ways. Now the tabs are in the back, the tabs at the base of the house. So that means this is the front of the house where it doesn't have a tab attached to it. And it is easier to decorate it while it's flat. So I'll start by adding the door centered on the panel and then all the way to the bottom edge. And then I have the door frame that was cut at the same time as that door, but it's actually in the same color. But I'll still put it on, and then if I want to change out the color of the door frame, then I'll just layer another one on top. And that really is just a personal preference. You could absolutely use just one door frame of whatever color you want it to be. I just kind of like it when I have that extra elevation on the door frame. I definitely try to design dies that are as user-friendly as I can make them. So you get a die that will cut 4 of the window backing rectangles. And those can be horizontal windows or vertical or a mixture of both. They can go anywhere you want them to. But you just put your color in the back first, the solid rectangle, and then you have a die that will cut all 4 window frames at the same time. You just have to remove the inside parts and then just layer that right over the top. So that's going to make it appear that the lights are on in the house, but again, you get all 4 at one time. There is a die that will cut 2 little flower box shaped pieces with stems attached, and then you have 4 actual flower boxes. So if you just put the flower box over the green part at the bottom, then you'll have 3 individual stems sticking up. And then that can just go right below the window. And then you have your die that cuts the 6 little flowers at one time. And that has a stencil feature too, so I just used a little pen through the middle of it to add the centers of the flowers. So I cut flowers out of both pink and blue for this card. If you don't want to do 3 flowers in a window box, you also have individual stems so that you could do 1 or 2, you know, just however many you want to do. So you can do those individually as well. And the little individual stems have leaves attached to them. Okay, so now I'm just going to go around the house and add a flower box and window to the other 2 sides. Okay, once the house is decorated, then I can add the roof support. So that's that piece that was cut at the same time as the house. It's been scored for the end tabs and then the 2 tabs in the middle. And just fold them one way, the other, both ways. It doesn't matter at this point. They're going to learn both folds anyway. Okay, so the shape of those outer tabs is such that they will line up perfectly with the roof to just span the house like this. So you can do that in the flat position. So you just take one of those end tabs and add some adhesive behind it. And then it is shaped to fit right up to the point of the house and then go along the roof line. So you can see how nice it just lines up. Really easy to do. Point at the point and then right along the edge of the triangle. And then that tab is attached. Okay, and then on this side over here, you can see I can just add the adhesive to that tab and press the front of the house to it. So it's really easy to do this in the flat position, and the way the die is designed, you just line it right up with the point and the edge of the house. And then once you have it attached, I would suggest collapsing the house the opposite way as well. Then the upper tabs are going to fold down. Those are what's going to hold the roof on. And I like to fold the one that's towards the front of the house to the right and the one that's to the back of the house to the left. Okay, so our house is ready for a roof, so let's work on that. So there's a very cool feature with this die. It has an extra layer in it. It's a stamping layer. It is optional because you can use the die just like normal, die cut it with your regular paper and sandwich. However, because it does have that extra layer for stamping, that layer is going to press into your paper and give you that shingle pattern even if it is uninked. And it will also score it up the middle for folding. So that roof is cool even without ink. Okay, so now let's talk about putting some ink on it. I haven't found that the ink matters very much. I mean, I'm just using a distress cube because it's small and it's easy to maneuver and just kind of press onto the stamp layer, but I've used bigger ink pads as well. I would just try whatever ink pads you have. Just do it with scratch paper first and make sure that you like the look and that the ink covers nicely and you get an effect that you like. But there is a coating on that stamp layer that allows it to take that ink. Okay, so now I just have to run that through my die cutting machine like normal, and it is going to cut it, it is going to score it, and it is going to stamp it all at one time. So it's just such a time saver, you know, you don't have to try and line up a die with a stamped, you know, it's just all built in. So it's going to do the stamping at the same time as the die cutting and the scoring. And like I say, that score line is just right up the middle for folding. So either way, it looks great. And of course, experiment with different ink colors and different cardstocks. Do keep a rag handy where you can clean your die after stamping, and I just use water for that. So I just squirt it with a little bit of water. I've found that that works just fine. I don't have to use any kind of harsh chemicals or cleaners or anything, just a little water cleanup and a rag. Okay, now my die is clean and ready for the next card. Okay, so for attaching the roof to those tabs, you just need adhesive on the tab. So I'm just going to use my glue for that. Adhesive on the top of both tabs, and then you can actually press the back one inside the roof and then bring the other one over the top, and that way you can get a good centering on it so that you have the same amount of overhang on the front of the house as on the back. There is a chimney die in the set, and it does have an optional brick emboss feature. So if you just use an embossing sandwich in your machine and run it through, then it's going to have a raised brick texture. And then I just have to change back to a cutting sandwich in my machine and run it back through to die cut it. There is a tab at the bottom, a little tapered tab, so that just folds under, and then that's what's used to glue it to the roof, and it can just pretty much go anywhere you want it to go. So it's just the tab that gets glued to the roof, and then you'll have that chimney. I decided on a cute little square card, so 8.5 by 4.25, and then scored it in the center. And then I just added some paper panels that were a little bit smaller. Okay, to find the flat position of the house, make sure both of the tabs at the bottom are over the top of each other. If you collapse it and they're side by side like this, just reverse it until they're sitting over the top of each other. And then you'll add your adhesive to the back tab. And I do want that whole tab to be glued down, so I'm even going to kind of spread the glue out a little bit with my fingers so that it will really coat the entire tab with adhesive. And then I just need that tapered edge to be right in the fold of the card, making sure that I keep my house in. So I'm looking up at the top edge as well and making sure that it stays in. And I'm gluing down that bottom tab underneath there. Okay, then I just leave everything flat. I add my adhesive to the upper tab. Once again, I'm going to kind of spread that out so that I get good adhesion everywhere. And then keeping everything flat, I just need to close the card against the exposed adhesive. And now I just have to try and be patient. I'm going to kind of reach in there and just press that tab down inside the house and make sure that it's adhered before I open it. I'll just open it slowly and make sure. So I can look back there and see if I feel like the entire tab is glued down or if it needs a little bit more pressure. And a strong glue or tape is going to hold that house in the card just fine. So you don't necessarily have to reinforce it with a staple or a brad, but you always have that option. This would be the time to do it. So if you can reach in there with a stapler or a brad, you could go through that tab and hold it in there permanently. You're going to be decorating probably the front of the card anyway, so this would be the time to do it. But again, it's not necessary. I don't always do it. In fact, this is the first card I ever did. I just thought I might show that as an option, especially if you were, say, trying to attach the house to glitter paper or something where you were really having a hard time getting your adhesive to stick. For decorating this card, I thought I would use some pieces out of our Farm Edges die set. So I've grabbed the fence and then I've grabbed the stitched hill that has the tractor attached. I don't care about the tractor, but I'm going to make a little stitched path for in front of my house. The tiny house pop-up does come with a little die that will cut 4 rocks, and so those make a great little path in front of the door, but it wasn't going to show up very well against my pattern paper, so that's why I thought I would add that green strip of grass first. For the fence, I'm going to add some adhesive just to the end and attach it to the back of the house on that back left corner. And you do have the option to add a fence too to this front right corner, so on some cards that might look nice putting one there as well. I decided just for the back fence, and then I put a couple flowers on the fence. But then I wanted to kind of break up the pattern paper a little bit more, so I used that tractor edge, again just cutting the tractors off to make a stitched hill for behind the house, and boy, I came really close to making a catch point, so I lucked out that I made that just wide enough that the roof comes down and hits the grass and doesn't catch against it. So you do have to watch catch points for your tiny house. In this same release, we have a new welcome word that includes a shadow layer, so that works really nicely with the tiny house. And you do have to watch for catch points when you add things like dimensional greetings. I am going to use the words U and R out of our Word Set 11 treasure set. So I thought that was a nice greeting. You are welcome, maybe inviting somebody over. And then one last little touch for the card's interior is just a little heart up at the top of the chimney. We do have other house dies in our collection, including one called the Holiday House, which is just a flat decorator die, but works perfectly with the tiny house when you want to have a house on the front of the card as well. And then I even mixed in the flower boxes from the tiny house and the little heart at the chimney. Combining the O out of Memories and the UR out of Treasured in that same word set, I was able to make the word Our. So basically the front of the card says Our House, and then inside it says You Are Welcome. So maybe inviting someone over or changing your address. A piece of paper on the back will cover that staple and add some balance, and then I also added some fences and some additional flowers to the front of the card. And then as a last little touch, an oval inside the card as a place to write a personal greeting, just making sure I put it in a spot where there's no catch point. And since that is a 4 1/4 inch square, I can just mail that in an A2 envelope. And if you didn't have the holiday house, you could certainly just use the pieces in the tiny house to fashion a flat house for the front of the card as well. So that one on the right is actually the one from the packaging of this die set. And I did make a flat house on the front and then a 3D house inside, this time with the greeting Welcome Home. So the welcome was designed to go perfectly with a previously released die that's Home Sweet Home. So here's a Slim Flaps and Frames card where the welcome is inside. Welcome new neighbors, home sweet home. And then you've got the tiny house pop-up. And that iron fence comes out of our house and fence pop-up. So you can fit the tiny house pop-up in a slimline card. The quickest decoration is to just put the window frames over the rectangles right onto the side of the house. But if you want to get fancy, you can cut holes into the side of the house, put the window frames on the outside, and then put little curtains and things inside. So that little rectangle die that is sized to fit behind the door is also used to cut holes when you want to see into the house. So that rectangle is smaller than the window frame so that the window frame can still attach to the house around the hole. So different inks are going to give different effects on that stamped roof. So I'm using a pretty squishy pigment silver ink for this one. So I know I'm not going to get as crisp and even a look, but I still think it's cool. So most of the time I'm not going to go to the trouble to actually cut the holes into the side of the house for the windows, but I did want to show that in the video that you do have that capability. So that little pink house was just screaming for a card. So I put together a Happy Spring card using the Tiny Trees pop-up and also the fold splitter that's part of the Tiny Trees. And then I actually built the house on the other end of the fold splitter. So it was a fun experiment. I'm glad I tried it. I'm glad I know that it works, but I kind of don't like that the house doesn't come all the way down to sit on the ground. So in future cards, I probably will use the center fold for the house and the fold splitter just for trees. So here's an example of that. I used the tiny house with the mushroom tiny house add-on over the center fold, but then also the fold splitter behind it for 2 tiny trees. And I just think I like that better because the house comes down and sits on the ground. Okay, which brings us to the mushroom tiny house add-ons die set. This is an add-ons set. It only has 7 pieces and only the pieces that you add to the tiny house to convert it into a mushroom house. So the base is cut with the tiny house pop-up, but then I've added the round windows and window backers plus the rounded door and door frame from the mushroom tiny house add-ons set. And then you do have that stand-alone circle that can be used to back the door or to cut through the house when you want to have holes in it. So you just decorate the tiny house like normal and add the roof support. Just like when you're using the other roof, you fold your tabs down. The one in the back goes to the left, the one in the front goes to the right. I recommend patterned paper or very lightweight cardstock for the mushroom roof because it does have to kind of curve around. So definitely something lighter is better on that. And you can use just a pattern paper or you can take advantage of the stencil feature that's in it. So that will add some polka dots to the top of your roof. Or I could have used an embossing sandwich just to have raised polka dots, or I could have done embossing and stenciling. So you have all of the choices with that. And just make sure that you do wipe off your die after using it with ink. So the mushroom roof is pretty much like the other roof with one exception. It has 2 extra tabs that allow the front and the back of the roof to be connected so that you get that kind of rounded roof like this in the finished card. So it really makes it appear more like a mushroom or a toadstool. I think the easiest way to install it is to fold the 2 tabs in and have that be the back. So then just add some adhesive to the right tab of the tiny house and then fold that down into the closed position where the 2 tabs at the bottom line up, and then just get in there and get that 1 tab attached inside the roof so that the top of the roof line is right in the fold of the roof, and then you have an even amount on either side. So here, let me pick that up. So see, right here, there's an even amount, so it's kind of centered. All right, and then now I'm going to attach the other tab inside the roof, but also the 2 tabs that attach the front and the back to each other. So I can do all 3 of those at one time by doing it this way. And then keeping everything flat, I can just close the roof and attach those 3 tabs. After waiting for the glue to set up, then when you open it, it will expand the roof and it'll be more of that 3-dimensional kind of rounded roof. So it makes an adorable little mushroom house, but that roof could also be a beach hut. It does not have to be decorated as a mushroom house. Just really get creative with it. There is a mushroom top in the set that can be used to top the chimney. So it has a stencil feature on it if you want to add polka dots to that little mushroom top. Now that can be used just to make little standalone mushrooms as well. Either use the chimney out of the tiny house pop-up for the stem, or you could use the door out of the mushroom tiny house add-ons as a stem. So just gluing those little mushroom taps back to back around the chimney, then I've got that little tab at the bottom to attach that to the top of the mushroom house. So I kept this mushroom house very simple and classic with just the windows and the doors, but you do always have the option to use the flower boxes and flowers out of the tiny house pop-up, and those look really great with those round windows as well. I'm going to do a small little card for this one too, a little 3 3/4 by 4, and of course you can always go bigger. Now the collapsed position is where the tabs are over the top of each other, not where they're side by side. So make sure that you're collapsing it so they're over the top of each other, and then installing it in the card is the same as with the tiny house. You just make sure that it stays within the card limits, add a strong adhesive to the tab, put that in the card, then add your strong adhesive to the upper tab, close the card against it. And do give your glue a chance to set up, because you're asking it to do a lot to actually open and twist that roof that's actually curved and attached at the front and the back. So you really are asking a lot of those tabs. That might be another great spot for that staple that we were talking about. But in this case, it's adhering fine, and I really just don't even need a staple. It's optional to add the grass strip, but it does come in the Mushroom Tiny House Add-ons set. So there's a tab that folds under, and then the other end just attaches to the back of the house. So I do the attachment to the back of the house first by just adding my glue to the end of the grass, and then just going in there and pressing it to the back of the house so that it's coming straight out against the ground, attached to the house. And that tab at the base of the grass just attaches to the card. Now I think the best way to do that is actually to close the card and just kind of peel back the front of the card to where you can get in there with a little glue and add it to the bottom of that tab in the closed position, and then just keep everything flat while you press the card against it, and then you know you've got the exact right spot for it to pop up every time. Okay, so now I have that little strip of grass, and of course other things can attach to that and will pop up with the mushroom house. And of course that add-on strip of grass works with the tiny house roof as well. So you always have the option, if you have both sets, to just kind of mix and match between them. Some great decorator dies to go with the mushroom house, the gnome and Santa. I mean, the gnome can also just stand out there on the grass, which looks kind of cute next to the mushroom house. We also have the backyard charms that includes a fairy. So if you wanted to use, say, the mushroom house with the fairy, that looks really cute as well. So I went for the backyard charms to finish out that little mushroom house card. And then for a greeting, I chose Sweet Summer from our Word Set 6 Summer. And then the stitched oval out of that Home Sweet Home set. So our dies are always backwards compatible. They always work well with what has come before. Okay, a quick bit of inspiration from the design team. A Mushroom Tiny House by Fran Sabad. A Mushroom Tiny House by Kelly Booth. You can really see the difference in the colors in these and how wonderfully you can customize. Here is a tiny house card by Lois Bach where she created it as a dog house. And Lois was also very clever making a gingerbread house out of the tiny house pop-up. So just think about all of the different things that you can make with that tiny house. Frances Byrne used the tiny house in a slimline card and also mixed in some tiny trees. And then Sandy Diller did this very clever thing where she converted the tiny house into a toolbox and then filled it with our tool charms. And then finally, this really clever card by Sandy Diller where she's got the tiny house in the card and it lights up. The Tiny House Pop-Up and Mushroom Tiny House Add-ons are available on our website as well as a lot of your favorite online and local retailers. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com where you can find out information about purchasing these dies as well as links to all my other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.